Hi there and welcome to Hearthside. My name is Michelle. I am the author on this blog and I'm just finishing up all my catching up to my current blogs by creating accessible copies in a video format. So this is the last one, and then I'm hoping that when I go forward I will be able to release a new entry and then later in the week create the video for that one as well. So this last one that I wrote most recently is entitled, Does Gender Matter in Heathenry? So the short answer is no, not really. Which might seem a bit strange coming from me, as I'm toting my blog as from a female perspective. But I'll give you a bit of an insight about how that came about. So when I started my blog, I was interested in seeing more content from a diverse group of creators. There wasn't a lot of women making content about heathenry, and well, I mean, it was mostly white men, let's be honest. So would love to see other people stepping up as well. But that's where I was coming from with that one. And also just sort of, it seemed like in a lot of my circles I was being put in a position at that time where people thought that I would be a good representative in various ways to talk on behalf of various groups of women in heathenry. Obviously not all women in heathenry, but I'm a woman, I'm heathen, I have things to say that I hope are beneficial to everyone. But yeah, other people were wanting to hear more from me in some of my circles, so I sort of felt a little bit of a push to do that. It was a bit uncomfortable for me at first, and I'm definitely getting used to the whole video aspect as well. The videos are definitely secondary at this point, so if they're not great, that would be the reason. But I'm pushing back against there being very male-dominated conversations within heathenry, even though there's quite a few women in leadership positions. And, like, in my experience, there seems to be a fairly even amount of men and women who are heathen. So it just seems strange that in a lot of circles, those are not the voices that are being heard. So I'm pushing back against that, and I'm hoping that other people will push back against who is creating the content as well, so that we're hearing a wider variety of voices. I'm starting to see some really cool stuff on TikTok, and unfortunately that's a very limiting medium because of the length of the videos, but I know that's the popular way to do it now with all the sound bites and stuff. I want to do a little bit longer stuff, but not as long as some of the podcasts where people are talking back and forth either, because I don't think that's beneficial with just me talking at you. So the way I see it, gender is really a construct of the broader overculture. It doesn't really have a place in heathenry. We really have no way of knowing what the elder heathens would have thought about gender or sexual identity. And we know that there's examples of gender nonconformity in the lore. Obviously, Loki's the most obvious choice for that, but not the only choice. And I don't know, like, if that was some sort of element of the storytelling to make it more interesting, or if it was reflective of the actual culture at that time, and there's really no way for us to know. That said, we do know that historically there were people who stepped outside of their gender roles. A good example of that is Hervor, who was a woman who stepped up and led an army, who went to her ancestor's tomb to retrieve the familial sword. So there are examples of it in the lore, in the sagas, in the Eddas, both. So definitely, I think that it was within the realm of normal. As for gender roles of Vikings, for example, what we know mostly was written down from a Christian perspective, so we really have no way of knowing how accurate that was to how things were before the conversion. So I think when we're looking at it in modern practice, there's really no point in trying to create limitations based on gender or sexual identity. Occasionally, I know in my blogs I might talk about women's work or men's work, but it's really only to try to talk about concepts that are already being talked about and maybe need to be broken down, and just I'm using familiar terms sometimes just so that it makes sense. I try not to as much as possible because I think that's too limiting. But there are definitely a lot of the material that you'll come across is going to have that still, and that's something that all of us are working on breaking down. So it's a very slow shift, and I see the same shift happening also in the overculture to some extent. I know within a lot of my circles I've started to try to use they, them pronouns if I don't know a person's gender, which would be when I meet anyone really, until they correct me on that. But also it's taking me some time to get used to doing that because it's been drilled into me for so many years, and sometimes my brain just does not compute even if I want it to. So always trying to be the most welcoming to everyone that I can be, but I know I make mistakes and I hope that I'm getting better. So if I'm saying that there's like female knowledge or male knowledge in heathenry, that's just to give an understanding of the perceived roles. It does not mean that you need to conform to them. If that doesn't sit with you, don't do it. And there's ways to start to get around it, like within my own tribe where we use the word God person instead of Gothi or Geetha. So there's lots of different things like that we can start to do to make everything more inclusive for everyone. And there's really no reason for us not to break gender norms if that's what we want to do in our practice, in our lives. Even the example of Ergi, which they're talking about sometimes as if it's a derogatory term, I don't know if that's actually to do with the sexual element of it and magic being seen as receptive and therefore unmanly, or if it's just the general taboo that there was within the culture about magic practitioners in general. Like, they were usually people who were pushed to the edge of society. So I don't think that it's necessarily a attack on gender, a derogatory term in that way at all. How you choose to pursue it in your own practice, that's up to you, but that's my own perception, is that we don't know that that's actually why it was being used in a derogatory way. And again, this is all coming from records that are post-conversion, so it's really hard to know. And in modern heathenry, we have really no basis for prejudices at all, and even if we saw them historically, even if we thought that we saw them, that doesn't mean that we have not evolved past that thinking. This is the 21st century, guys. And I don't see any purpose for us to hold prejudice against people in our communities. And if we're doing that, it's definitely because there's people in our communities who are not comfortable with it and stuck in antiquated thinking that is not serving us at all. We need to be calling them out on this. We need to be making our spaces welcoming. And if we're not speaking out against tribe members when they're doing something wrong, then our tribe isn't functioning properly. So, in heathenry more broadly, I mean, we can think about deities. Sure, there's gods and goddesses. They seem to have gender, but I mean, that's from our perception, because the deities are much bigger than us. We're really only perceiving them, not even the full extent of them, usually. I think that gender, in the case of deities, is more to do with what their relationships are with each other and helping us to understand that. Do they have genders? Do they see themselves as having genders? I don't know. I haven't asked. I don't know if there's any way to ask that. I don't know. But I don't think that that's necessarily, like, I don't know if the gods see gender the way that we do. So that's something to consider as well. And I also know that there's only so much that I can say on this topic, because I mean, I'm a cisgender female identifying person. So I don't understand everything about how gender affects all people within heathenry, within our society in general. Everybody's got their own journey. I do identify as part of the LGBTQ plus community, but again, I don't feel comfortable speaking on behalf of everybody in that community. So, I mean, I'm just giving you my perspective. You can agree, disagree, take it for what it is or how you perceive it, and that's fine. But what I see in heathenry and in paganism in general is that it seems like overall there's a higher average number of people identifying as openly LGBTQ+, and a much higher average of people who are identifying as trans than the general population. And that's based on the 2017 Cragle study. But that said, that doesn't mean that all of pagan practice is always welcoming to the trans community or to every gender or anything like that. There's lots of work that we need to do. I definitely know there's work for us to do within heathenry, and while overall I think heathenry provides a safer space for inclusivity than a number of other religions, we obviously do still have these problems in our communities. Various subsections of heathenry are worse than others, but all of us have work to do. And even sometimes people are saying they're inclusive, but there's that but there that shouldn't be. So ignorant things can be said from time to time, and I think we all need to work to do better as much as we can. I do want to give a brief little shout out, and was definitely not put up to this, and they definitely don't know what's happening, but I want to give a big shout out to Heathen Women United, which has been a very inclusive group for the time that I've been involved with them. They're a safe space. They welcome the trans community. They're even upping that recently that I've seen, and it's really great to see that. Another thing that I would like to give a shout out to is what inspired me to create these videos in the first place, which is the Wyrd Thing podcast, which talks about diversity and inclusion within heathenry and also accessibility. So it's really worth checking out that. It's on Spotify and probably some other different things. I think they have a website. You can just Google it. I will also put the links for both Heathen Women United and the Wyrd Thing below. And yeah, as inclusive heathens, we need to make sure we're creating these safe spaces so that everyone can participate. And that means listening to understand when there's members of marginalized communities. But this also doesn't mean that in heathenry that every new person's immediately going to be fully welcomed by the tribe, because that never happens. It doesn't have to do with your gender, your sexual identity, any difference that you might have as a marginalized person. That's just the way that most tribes are structured, that you have to prove your worth within them. If someone is clearly, or if some tribe clearly is discriminating against you, then that's not the tribe for you, and they need to do better, but you should get out. And yeah, for the most part, tribes are going to be welcoming, but they're always going to expect some sort of worthing for new members. So that's just something that's a little bit different in heathenry than maybe some other religions, if you're coming to it new, that you just need to be aware of. But yeah, we do want to make heathenry safe for everyone, and that means standing up for marginalized communities whenever necessary, and having these conversations more broadly and openly within heathenry. So I hope that that was helpful to some people. The timing of when I wrote this was a bit unfortunate because I had no idea some of the things that had been going on in the broader heathen community at the same time that were related to these kind of issues. So it has definitely had an interesting reception so far, and I will be interested to see what happens with this video. Anyways, I'm super excited that I have finally caught up all the videos up to where my blog is currently, and I really look forward to being able to write the blog and then create the video in the same week, because I feel like I'll remember all the material so much better, and it will be easier to do the videos that way instead of me trying to think it all through and try to remember what I said months and months ago. So yeah, I'm really excited. I hope you guys are too, and I will see you next time.